Welcome back to a Dallas Cowboys breakdown on the Times Record News. I'm here with Jonathan Hull. I'm Andy Newberry. The 3-1 Dallas Cowboys, division leading Dallas Cowboys, thanks to, like I thought, the Niners would handle the Eagles. They gave Cowboys some good news, and then the Cowboys defense shuts them out in the first half. So did you fall out of your chair?
There's a lot of disbelief in the press box, I'll say that, at the AT&T Stadium. And a lot of jabs at Rob Ryan, too. That was persistent throughout the day. So
I almost thought at the end of the game that Dez Bryant touchdown was almost a stick at Deshaun Payton and Rob Ryan.
Right.
Like we know Rob Ryan's going to leave him out there by himself.
Right. Yeah, well, who would have thought that the Cowboys coaching staff, with Jason Garrett, Scott Linehan, a bunch of guys that don't get much credit, in fact, they get more blame than they get credit, out-coaches Sean Payton and Rob Ryan, a coaching staff that is very much loved by the media, that the media loves to hype up, to build up. And it was Garrett and his staff that completely outcoached him. I would still
make that trade of Garrett.
I probably would.
But on that night, Garrett's staff was better.
Completely better.
Yeah.
There's no question. I mean, you look at some of the decisions that Sean Payton
Have you
made.
ever seen a worse fake punt?
No, this is the worst fake punt. And if everybody in the building.
On Friday nights, maybe a Class 2A team, you probably haven't seen a worse fake punt.
Well, and as soon as you walk out on the field in that situation, you're thinking, you might want to watch the fake. And lo and behold,
motion, and just in case you had forgotten that it might be a fake situation,
here's the fake.
Here, I'm going in motion. I'm not gunning.
And at the same time, you take one of the most prolific quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, you take him off the field.
Yeah. I get frustrated at our high school teams that do that. Sometimes you'll get down to, okay, this is your most important play if you're going to come back and win this game. And they'll, in whatever sport, take the ball, take the bat, they'll do something to take it away from their best player winning them the game.
Does not make sense. I think you're better off.
Even when they're days later in a room watching the film, they're going, that didn't make sense.
No, I'm sure Sean Payton's had to answer too many questions about it. But who wouldn't rather have Drew Brees throwing the ball up to Jimmy Graham in that situation?
What do you think put the Cowboys in that situation other than the offensive line?
Well, other than the offensive line really is the biggest point to me. But, everything worked right. The defense did a great job of keeping things in front of them. And give it, the Saints didn't really spread the ball out early on. It seemed like they had a different game plan. Like they were determined to establish the run early and keep it established. And then when it wasn't working, they had all of a sudden they're behind and they just got to abandon that game plan altogether.
Yeah, and I think this, I don't think anybody still believes that this Cowboy defense has a great physical talent.
No.
Like there's not a great shutdown. There's no Richard Sherman.
No.
And there's no linebacker that everybody's going to put on an all-pro team. Mm-hmm. And their defensive line, they didn't even have any sacks until the other night. They got 2 and 1 was on the punt.
Yeah.
And so, but what I'm seeing is a lot of guys around the ball, and they played fairly physical, I thought.
They play physical enough. The defensive line, this was their best game. I mean, the pass rush was the best that it's been all year because there actually was one on a consistent basis.
Yeah. Even though they had
a couple
sack of Breeze.
Yeah, 1 sack of Breeze and the sack of the punter, which was the first full sack for anybody this year on the Dallas Cowboys defense. But
they were pressured.
They were pressured
him to get rid of it quicker than he wanted.
He was never comfortable, and I think that was the biggest deal. He was never comfortable. And listen, Drew Brees still completed 72% of his passes, but he's Drew Brees. You expect him to complete passes even when he's uncomfortable.
But the overriding factor, I talked about yesterday, is the Cowboys are allowing their offense to win the game.
Yeah.
Not allowing them, like, we're going to try to put up 500 yards. They're like, we are going to put our imprint on this game because we're going to hold the ball 6 minutes and put 7 points on the board.
Yeah, the identity.
And then when we get the ball again, we're going to run it right at you again. Mm-hmm. And when you get lulled into that, we're going to hit Terrence Williams, but then we're going to go back and run the ball at you again.
The identity of that offense is becoming the offensive line and the way that they can control a game and just completely take over anything you need them to. And that's in the column I wrote. I referred to this as a 1990s style of Dallas Cowboys offensive line.
Yeah,
it's on that level.
So, and then that's great offensive lines make for great play callers.
Yeah,
they really
it makes things a lot easier, don't they?
They really do. When the Saints really have everybody going, people think of Drew Brees, but their running game is always effective.
Yeah.
And
they usually have a trio of running backs that are out there, and each one of them do something well. And not having, they're missing. Mark Ingram had really been having a good year, and he torched the Cowboys last year, and not having him hurt.
Now, I would put the Cowboy offense probably,
it's as good
second in the league, maybe.
It's hard to take
Denver ahead of them.
But after that, you're right.
The second best coordinator behind Peyton Manning right now might be Scott Linehan.
Scott Linehan might get a head coaching job again out of this deal. Right now, if the defense plays like it is, Rod Marinelli might too.
Small sample size, but it's the quarter pole. And then they got the Texans coming in. I think they're going to beat the Texans.
I feel like they'll beat the Texans.
Barring a losing the turnover battle by 2, I think they win this game.
If you're relying, and no offense, J.J. Watt's an amazing player. Let's get that straight. I don't think anyone's going to. I don't think anyone's going to argue. But if you're relying on an interception, touchdown return by your defensive end to win a game, that's not a formula that's going to consistently win you football games.
No. And I think Houston, they can try to run the ball a little bit. So, the key will be who can get the run established. But I think there's reason to believe that the Cowboys will establish it first. And then if that game gets put on Ryan Fitzpatrick, Dallas will win the game.
The Cowboys have taken the ball first, I think, every time they've won the toss.
They should.
This year, and they should. Yeah, there's a reason for that. A lot of people see that. Well, don't you want it to start the second half? Not in this situation.
You want
They establish themselves right away.
Yeah. You want your offense to dictate.
They're establishing themselves right away, as long as DeMarco Murray doesn't fumble.
So, they made it through a game without him fumbling.
That's right.
And they led at halftime.
They did.
It wasn't a coincidence.
No, it was a crazy thing to see. Jim Mora was actually sitting right in front of me in the press box, and he was sitting with a bunch of New Orleans TV guys that were cheering.
Did you ask him about the playoffs?
Did not. No, nobody brought up the playoffs in front of Jim Mora, but you could tell he was kind of breaking it down too, and he's saying the same thing. I mean, the Cowboys' offensive line is just dominating things.
So, and that's going to get people's attention, and I think that is eventually going to lead to some really big plays where maybe Romo's throwing for 300 yards without having to throw 30 times.
Well, you saw that opening drive. A lot of that opening drive this past week was done through the passing game. They spread it out a lot more than they had in the previous weeks, and that tells you two things. One, that teams are starting to play the run a lot more against the Cowboys, and two, Romo's finally looking healthy, starting to feel confident, and his coaching staff in turn is having more confidence in what he can do as well.
Again, show me a brilliant play caller, and I'll show you a good offensive line.
That's right.
So, we'll be back next week, and we'll see if we're talking about the 4-1 Cowboys or the up and down Cowboys of previous years.